If you can hear my car, like downtown in Seattle, you live on like under the 15th floor. You need to get your money up and move up higher. I'm gonna be honest with you. Your cats, your children, I don't give a wake the up, Seattle. I don't care.
Well, that is the driver of the infamous Belltown Hellcat, otherwise known as Miles Hudson. As heard on Fox 13 News, indeed locked up briefly this week after a series of legal troubles. So what is next in this saga, and what does that mean for the future of street racing in Seattle? Plus, an ultimatum from one of the restaurant delivery app companies to the city of Seattle. They want a new law on the books regarding delivery driver wages, or they're going to put another fee into effect. We'll see how that goes. Also, how about an update on misdemeanor crimes, jail space, and the next move for the city of Seattle? Well, all that and more this week on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I am a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are mine, and I'm joined once again by my co-host, David Croman. David, thank you for being here. And folks, I just want to let you know, David and I actually caught our first baseball game together last week, watched the Mariners, and I wanted to let you know, while we were together at the game, the Mariners actually had a lead. They were shutting out the Angels. David, it was working out really well. I know you had to leave early, but I don't know. I still think we're a good luck charm for that team. What do you think?
Yeah, because the second I left, then they ended up losing. So
there we go.
It must be me.
Don't break the chain. Don't break the chain. I love it. Thank you, David, as always, for joining me here. Thanks to City Grind Espresso, our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast on the first floor of City Hall. And a special thanks to our show patrons. Steve threw a good topic our way we're going to take a look at in the near future. And Sam, we're going to tackle a question from you this week. Thank you very much. So become a patron. Get access to Patrons First podcast before anybody else. And as with Sam and Steve, we answer your questions on the show. And you even get yourself an awesome Seattle News, Views, and Brews decal. Wow, how about that? All right, well, become a patron, and that's what it's all about. Find this podcast on Patreon, Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Thanks also to Converge Media. The video version of the podcast airs on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. Let's get things rolling then, right here, right now. Well, there has been plenty going on with the Seattle City Council this week. Councilmember Joy Hollingsworth getting an earful in public comment. Actually, all the council members getting an earful here about the efforts to deal with the implementation of higher minimum wage in smaller businesses. This is a story we covered last week. Even former Councilmember Shama Sawant spoke out during public comment. We'll definitely keep you posted on how all that shakes out. But let's first tackle this street racing story that's become a national sensation. Miles Hudson, the infamous Belltown Hellcat driver, was put into King County Jail on Monday after a rather bizarre session in court where he had a full headdress on, wrapped around his face as well. As the Seattle Times reports, he posted bail and was released Tuesday morning. The charges included reckless driving, stalking charges involving his ex-girlfriend, and disclosing intimate images without consent. The court also barred Miles Hudson from posting any content on Instagram or Twitch, which is a live streaming platform. And I just wanted to get your take on this, David. Does this arrest in this situation in court, does it shut down the Hellcat? Is he going to find another social media platform, or what do you see happening next here?
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I mean, it's kind of a Hydra situation in some ways, which is when you the more kind of heat he takes, it seems like the more popular he gets on social media.
Right. Chop off one head and three more appear, you bet.
Yeah. This one, though, he has been sort of explicitly barred from posting on social media, and I think was told to delete a post mid-hearing that he had put up. And then, there are some other charges here on, stalking and sending illicit images without permission. And, those are the sort of charges where maybe the charm or perceived charm or sort of outlaw, his kind of outlaw attitude about driving around Seattle, people seem to kind of like. But the other ones are not, those are more serious, I think, in the eyes of people, and maybe I would think would give people a little more pause about this guy. I don't know kind of what the extent of which the Seattle Municipal Court and the jail system can kind of finally put an end to this. I think there are certain limits that it runs up against when somebody has a fairly blatant disregard for the consequences that come with that. And he's somebody who certainly seems to have that.
Yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to go with this, David, because I was just watching all these different videos where Hudson's posting stuff online. It's really clear he does not care. He was even trying to post live videos during his hearing in the courtroom. As you mentioned, the judge shut him down for that, and I guess he was trying to provide some breaking news. I don't know about that, but no respect for the judicial system there for sure. And I just kind of wanted to look at this with regard to the institution of the courts. Clearly, the city of Seattle is trying to make a strong stance when it comes to street racing or whatever else. When you've got a guy in Miles Hudson who is still laughing, what does that do to those different institutions, I guess, is the big question I'm thinking about here.
Yeah, I mean it's a high profile example of the stress that those institutions are under. I mean it does have a bit of a tie in to these conversations around the jail and whether Seattle can or can't book people when they want to, and then I mean there's a pretty high failure to appear rate in Seattle Municipal Court, and
Right.
I think law enforcement at all levels is sort of struggling with what you do, and people just don't show up or don't pay attention to what the orders are. Mr. Hudson is quite a bit different than I think a lot of the examples, just because he's lives in a fancy apartment and
Yeah.
is doing this for social media attention. But there is a little bit of a connection there, which is just finding the limits of this system's ability to kind of force its authority and
Yeah.
assert its authority and legitimacy as a entity that theoretically is supposed to keep people in Seattle safe.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you layer on top of that the social media piece. That's what really makes it interesting for me as well. All right, well, David, I wanted to shift gears, if I could, with you to another legal struggle, if you will. This one for the council itself, regarding the law Council President Nelson has been trying to push through, which would lower the minimum wage for app-based delivery drivers. The previous council raised it. Those raises went into effect in January of this year. App companies at that point started slapping on the $5 fees. And you wrote about this in the Seattle Times. DoorDash, one of the biggest app companies, has an ultimatum that's essentially going to go into effect at the start of August here, they're saying. If the council can't pass a new version of this law, get ready for another fee on top of that $5 fee. Is that what we're looking at here? What do we got?
Yeah, so they're saying they would put this on some long distance orders, but it is, their argument is, hey, we've been telling you for a long time that this new wage law is eating into our viability and sustainability here. We added this $5 fee before, but that's not covering it. And so we were basically they're taking this position that we were willing to wait for a while, but if the council doesn't move on this bill that they passed out of committee, we're going to put this fee into place on some delivery orders. I mean, all of this is the kind of running theme of this back and forth is it's sort of hard to fact check all of this because they're so protective of their internal data and
Right.
basically refuse to show their work. And then there's also some much larger forces on the kind of gig work app-based economy. I think up and down, Uber, Lyft, all of these entities have been raising prices as capital support has disappeared and
Right.
there are more expectations that they actually turn a profit. So it's hard to parse out what of this is kind of larger forces on that economy versus what is specifically related to this wage law.
Yeah.
DoorDash is putting all of it onto the wage law, but that makes sense because they want it rolled back. And so this, again, I don't know how much of this is true. I think some of it is probably true that they feel like this wage law is impacting their bottom line.
Sure
I don't
it is,
know
yeah.
if it's the full truth. But at the end of the day, they're using this fee threat as a leverage point to try and unstick this bill, which has been basically on the verge of death for, I don't know, 3 months at this point.
Yeah, and that whole deal of DoorDash crying poor in this one. I know Working Washington, which is the big labor group behind making sure that workers get a fair wage, et cetera, they're saying, hey, wait a minute, you're pouring all this money into advertising and all these other things to push back on these wage laws in Seattle and around the country. Are you saying you really can't afford to pay workers more? I think that's an important piece of this too.
Yeah, they've spent, between their kind of direct lobbying and indirect lobbying, have spent well over $1 million.
Wow.
They spent, I think, $200,000 just last month. So yes, there is an expensive lobbying push. These are companies where $1 million is not, in their estimation, they're losing more because of this law. So, I don't know exactly the one-to-one correlation there, but the point stands that they're spending a whole lot on lobbying, and so the labor community is saying, "Hey, you don't look so poor to me."
Yeah, yeah. Do you see any breakthrough on this logjam here with the council? Because it just seems like they're really divided. I don't see a resolution within that block coming anytime soon. Have you heard anything new on that?
No, I've checked in, as recently as a couple days ago, and I was told that there are no changes or updates. So, as far as I can tell, the bill is sitting in this kind of limbo state where they have 4 votes to pass something, but they don't have 5 votes to pass something. And some council members want to raise the per mile reimbursement rate to something closer to what the IRS says is standard, and raise kind of hourly rate too. The companies are saying, nope, we've gone as far as we we can. If you go any higher than that, we can't make any promises about rolling back fees.
Wow.
And so I think the companies appear to be fairly dug in on their position. I don't know exactly how dug in specifically Councilmember Hollingsworth and Moore are in theirs, but the fact that has been sitting here for several months at this point and not moving anywhere suggests they're quite dug in. And so, the labor world is perfectly happy to let this kind of just sit there because they think the current wages are working fine for workers.
Right. Wow. So much ahead with that one. I appreciate the follow-up there, David. Let's talk about what's coming up. A new twist in the city's push to put people accused of misdemeanors behind bars. It looks like the King County Jail is going to make some changes that could impact this situation. We'll explain coming up on Now Hear This. Well, this week, the Seattle City Council is working on that situation we reported on last week in a special Public Safety Committee meeting on Wednesday to set up a contract with SCORE, that jail down in Des Moines. This would be for people who commit misdemeanors. But also unfolding over the last week, the city has negotiated with King County to book a few more of these people accused of misdemeanors, at least within the downtown core, into the King County Jail. Lisa Dugard, the co-chair for the group Purpose Dignity Action, which set up the first incarceration diversion program in Belltown years ago, says this isn't necessarily a push from the city to put more people in jail, though it may seem that way.
I don't actually think this is a debate about more versus fewer people in jail. It's about the city's ability to determine when individuals, in their view, need to be booked into jail and to not be met with an administrative barrier to that decision.
Lisa Dugard interviewed on the Seattle Nice podcast this week. David, a lot to unpack here, but first and foremost, it looks like several misdemeanors, which up until late July were not even bookable offenses for the King County Jail, are now bookable again, at least for people arrested in the downtown area. The city has negotiated that much with King County, it sounds like, after bringing up the fact that, hey, Seattle's paying for 200 beds in the jail. We're only using 80, and you're saying we can't book on these offenses? That was the point of Council President Sarah Nelson here, and I just wanted to ask, is this a win for Sarah Nelson, who was basically saying, hey, King County, give us our money back?
Yeah, my understanding of this is it's sort of an operation. I don't know that it's like a permanent opening of the jail to arrests in the downtown area. I think it's kind of a temporary push.
Okay.
King County has been saying for a while that this is something the city can do if they make the right argument and can present their case that this is a public safety necessity, that the county can make exemptions to its booking restrictions. And so I think the county would say, we've been open the whole time that this is a possibility for you guys to do it, and here's proof that we're willing to. I mean, we're giving the okay to kind of make this push in the downtown area.
Right.
Seattle, I think, would prefer that it not be kind of operation-based, that this is an option open to them at all times. And so, I think, I don't know who's happy here, but I think for the county, they're saying this is how the system's supposed to work. The city's saying, basically, no, it's not.
And I guess it seems like there is some friction there between a new city push, at least, to really get these misdemeanors, get people put into jail, and a county push, which I think is towards these programs that would divert people away from incarceration. Do you see that tension building there, or what is this an indication of? Because I don't see the county and city necessarily on the same page here.
No, they're not on the same page, and there certainly is friction. I think the friction is less about kind of the county wanting more diversion, though they do, and more about why there are booking restrictions at all. That the county is saying, look, we have the reality is we don't have enough staff, and we're working on it, and we're hoping that can improve, but it is what it is right now. And as such, we are going to prioritize booking felonies in our jail because those are the more serious crimes.
Right.
That leaves Seattle in a kind of, squeezed state. I think Seattle has suspects that there is some policy decisions being made by the county, which is kind of goes to what you are saying. I think the members of the council and city attorney's office have sort of implied that Dow Constantine is making a specific policy choice to book restrictions. The county's pretty adamant that that's not the case. But it does kind of get to this friction where Seattle's saying, you owe us these beds, and King County saying it just is what it is right now. And by the way, if you're really upset with us about this, feel free to cancel your contract. We'll happily take the staff hours and divert them over to felonies because, we basically think misdemeanors are not as important, and we're having a hard time even booking felonies right now.
Yeah, and also on top of that, we're talking about a city contract with the King County Jail that last one on the books is from 2017, and in between that period and now, costs have gone up for the jail, and I think the jail is saying, hey, this isn't a money back situation. The actual dollars that you've been paying for us doesn't really cover, the people that are here to begin with. So I think there's a piece of friction there too, that contract you're talking about.
Yeah, Council President Nelson has said publicly a few times, I want my money back, and King County is saying there is no money to give back. Even with the fewer number of beds you're getting, that maybe just about covers the cost of those 80 beds. When you were quote paying for 200 beds, the amount of money you were giving us was not enough to actually cover those 200 beds.
Yeah.
It's an interesting situation because I do think that there is probably fairly commonly some friction between the county and the city, but this one is just playing out so publicly.
Yeah, right.
I was sent a kind of internal email to the King County Council members with some pretty harsh words for Seattle City Council. It wasn't exactly like they published it on their website, but they sent it to enough people that they had to know somebody was going to pass it along to press and it would get out. They're not doing a lot to keep this conversation in private. There appear to be some conscious choices to air some of these grievances publicly right now.
Wow. Yeah, that'll be something very interesting to see that play out on top of what the council is doing this week to work out this contract with SCORE to send more misdemeanor people accused of misdemeanors down to the Des Moines area. So a lot still ahead with that one. And David, thank you for working on that with me as well. In other news that impacts your ballot and your billfold here, the city of Seattle and the state this week are touting a program that would help about 1/5 of households in Washington with their energy bills. It's a $200 energy credit per household to be paid out in September, according to the Seattle Times, and that money comes from the Climate Commitment Act. The CCA, as we've talked about before, includes that carbon offset auction system that our state's largest polluters pay into. The CCA is also right in the sights of I-2117, which would repeal our state's carbon auction program. David, the timing is really right on with this announcement to try to sway voters, it sounds like, especially the lower income voters out there, it seems.
Yeah, and it feels like we've heard a few kind of announcements or news stories about investments from the CCA, and I don't think I don't want to say it's 100% political because these are real energy rebates.
Of course,
it's the people who need them are going to take advantage of them.
Right.
I do think that the publicity they are getting is not an accident on the part of the people who are rolling them out. Trying to sort of show how these dollars are being spent. I don't know if it's too late for them. The polling on that is not great, although polling on initiatives is sort of famously jumpy, I guess. Yeah. So it's hard to know exactly where things are at, but I don't think it's an accident that they're having news conferences on energy rebates.
Yeah, fair, and I think the timing is also interesting here in that we've been talking about this on the podcast, these substantial price hikes for energy. Seattle City Light's going through this. Other local governments are going through this too. It's happening this fall, and this new boost from the CCA provides some help there as well for people having trouble with their bills. And I was just really struck by this statistic, David. 1 out of 5 households in our state will qualify for this energy assistance. And I'm just reminded that this global race to produce more energy, really try to go green, it may have an unintended impact on people of lesser means, which the very people it's trying to protect here. I just thought that 20% of state residents needing help, that's a substantial number.
Yeah, it is. And like you said, there's a lot of pressure on energy agencies across the state pushing that up. We talked about Seattle City Light, which is basically struggling with increased demand, less reliable supply, increased labor costs, and increased supply costs, all pushing things up. My colleagues had a really good story about the kind of data center industry
and
in Central
Washington.
Of
energy they have. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And basically the officials out there saying, look, we're tapped out of clean energy. I mean, the hydro is great, but it has a pretty hard cap we can't go above. It's not like we can add more water to the dams.
Right.
And so, and I think Seattle City Light is facing this too, which is once you kind of, we've grown so accustomed to having basically endless supplies of clean energy in the state. What happens when that supply turns out to not be endless? And you're also expected to keep everything clean. It gets a little more difficult to the point where, Seattle City Light's talking about doing something it's never done before, which is add solar panels and build windmills and things like that, which is great and all, but it's slow and it's a new entry point into infrastructure, which could be complicated. So it's a kind of messy situation right now for specifically, West Coast clean focused utility agencies.
Right. A lot of different pressures on here, including the people that need to pay the bills. That's an important piece of this as well. All right. Well, coming up, where can you get the best coverage of hyper-local news about your community? Beyond this podcast, of course. Well, we had a patron ask a question about that. We're going to tackle it next on You Ask, We Answer. A big thanks to all of our show patrons out there. This is the You Ask, We Answer segment of the show. Patrons send in questions. If you'd like to have your question asked on the podcast, here's how you do it. Become a patron. And please email us at seattlenewsviewsandbrews@gmail.com. Spell it all out. We will get back to you, and thanks always for writing. This week's question, David, comes in from Sam, who asks this. Are there any resources for smaller city local news other than the larger regional news sources? I live in Newcastle, Washington. Shout out to Newcastle. And despite our city council getting an impressive amount of coverage in the last half of June, there really isn't anything on a weekly or monthly basis. And while I do try to attend our city council meetings and planning commission meetings, props to you, Sam, it takes up a lot of time for someone who has a young family. Sam, thank you for the question. And the answer is, I don't have a great answer for you. And yes, there was a lot of coverage in June when the council in Newcastle voted against raising a pride flag. But beyond that, where's the coverage? I wanted to try to approach this question, David, to get a perspective of how you cover city government. And I do some different things to try to get some insights here. And one tip, I've emailed this to Sam, if you haven't done this already, sir, a link to receive weekly emails from the city of Newcastle that will tell you what's on the agenda for the council and its committees. That's a pretty powerful place to start. I wanted to point that out. But I get it. It does take up a lot of time. David, can I get an insight at all into your process? I want to think about the publicly available tools that you use to follow news at Seattle City Hall that might spark some ideas for Sam out in Newcastle. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll say first, it's a depressing reality that the only way you can get news is to basically be a reporter yourself.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be that way. Unfortunately, it is. And
yeah, we have a lot of smaller newspapers that have not survived. And I know the Bellevue Reporter does some work out in that area, but certainly not as localized. Yeah, keep going, please.
No, it's thin. Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of just watching council meetings and things like that. But, you can always, if it's not something that you're interested in, at that moment, and it's you just kind of trying to stay generally educated, you can always read minutes of meetings, and that kind of gives you a more efficient wrap up of what was talked about. Of course, if you want to know what's happening in real time, the minutes don't come out for usually until the next council meeting. But that's kind of a quick way to to keep tabs on things. Yeah, I mean, agendas, you can, usually just click through the agendas, and they usually have at least the presentations that people are going to give. And
right.
So if you're not trying to spend hours kind of sifting through people talking, you can at least kind of scan the PowerPoints and see what their main talking points are going to be.
Right.
So, I mean, as far as being having a young family and also trying to basically educate yourself, those are the two.
These are problems that David is dealing with in real time. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Although, but for me, it's my full-time job.
That's true. That's true.
I have the time during the day to do this. I don't know, I would not be able to do it if I had a different full-time job and was also trying to keep up on these things. So those would be my tips for, efficient tracking of local government, which is minutes and presentations usually posted online.
Yeah, and I guess maybe give a nudge to a newspaper like the Bellevue Reporter or something like that. I mean, is that a worthwhile advocacy? I know people are always sending in letters and things like that, trying to nudge your local paper that way. What do you think about that kind of tactic?
Yeah, of course. I don't know anyone at the Bellevue Reporter. I would imagine there are not very many of them, and they're probably fairly stretched thin. But if you see something that feels newsworthy, there's a decent chance that because if you're covering the quote east side or whatever, there's so many cities over there. There's a decent chance that a reporter has not gotten around to checking every agenda item for every local town or local council. So if there's something that shows up that you notice that is particularly newsworthy and you don't have a lot of faith that anybody knows about it, then sending a pleasantly worded short email to the reporter to let them know about something is a great idea, because we like tips and we like people flagging stuff for us.
Absolutely true. Yeah, flagging those different things is a very important part of it. Well, Sam, thank you for the question. And David, thank you for your transparency and openness on that. Appreciate it as always. But we do need to wrap up, sir. And David, I think you and I were experiencing a bit of a flashback this week. There we saw Kshama Sawant, no longer a council member, but actually showing up in council chambers to push for the minimum wage deal that she championed back in 2015. Flashback, what was that like for you? It was a very strange moment.
I know. The Kshama Sawant standing in City Hall with the red posters with $15 on them, which is funny because the $15 has become a sort of stand-in for Seattle's minimum wage. It's actually quite a bit higher than $15.
Agreed. Yeah, it's close to $20, right?
Yeah. So I feel like maybe it's time to retire the $15 mantra, because we're kind of well beyond that at this point.
Yeah.
But it's thinking back to, I wasn't a reporter in 2014, but I mean, it seems like we went back in time to 2014 when she was first elected and doing exactly that. And so here we are again.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that goes, because there's a lot of shouting and a lot of signs getting popped up there in council chambers, which I know the current city council wasn't all that happy about. So, more to come on that one, folks, and we'll keep you posted on what's happening here with Seattle News, Views, and Brews. And I thank you, David, and I thank everybody who is listening to the show. This is the podcast where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Thanks especially to our patrons who support the show. If you want to be a patron, find this podcast on Patreon, Seattle News, Views, and Brews. You can hear us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media. We will see you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2024.